Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. Hey there, welcome back. Welcome to You Know Everything, the business podcast where we stare directly at the drywall and punch through it to see the wiring underneath. It's funny, as I record this also, Shannon, you'd be proud of me, did a mic check halfway through, wrong mic, starting over. Here we are. That's adaptive. I'm in the middle of scheduling this big team meeting, right? And it's so funny because even as much as I preach, I get to practice. And so I have a bunch of people who think I'm a boss because I'm scheduling. No, that's just actually part of my job. We're all doing the same job here. So then they think I'm in charge. Then they want to complain at me about a way of organizing and connecting with each other. I am open to other ideas. And yes, it's going to interrupt at least 80% of our time because 20% of the staff is working on any given day. It doesn't matter what day because people are working. So whether it's a weekend or a weekday, might only affect the person who works the Monday through Friday schedule. But these are all expectations, right? These are all the old ways of working. Well, if it interrupts my time, then it's extraction, but it can interrupt somebody else's time. I'm not even thinking about that. Or if I'm deciding this doesn't feel good in the moment for me, honor that. And that's going to disappoint and frustrate other people. Can we make space for that? These are the types of things in Business 3.0 we're going to be negotiating. This is why I wrote a book. It's not as simple as make the change. It's not as simple as adapt or die. It involves so much of who we believe ourselves to be, how we became who we are, and therefore the ways in which we internalize and interpret and therefore personalize our relationships with each other, our ways of organizing. So I don't think there's a more important conversation to be had. That's why I've been talking about this for 25 years. And it's funny because this episode is going to be a little bit more steeped in American history. I know there's a lot of you that aren't from the here, but you're like, what the fuck is wrong with your country? And I mean, again, anecdotal as per most of my data that I use on this podcast, because that's what inspires me. It's you. And in our exchange and our conversations. So for those of you who have asked me what the fuck is wrong with America, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how industrialization, manifest destiny, corporatization, privatization, profit obsession got us here, and why I believe we are now the corporation of America rather than the United States. And not from a political standpoint, but from an organizational purview. I think history repeats itself. I think history rhymes. I talked a little bit about this in the last episode. There's some outliers that are going to inform our graph, right? And in the interim, we're also being asked to perform, to be profitable, to be successful, right? Some of us are stepping up to that plate a little faster than others. But what I hope to help everybody, myself most importantly, understand is, what do we need to do differently in every given moment? What assumptions are we making? What default tendencies are we relying upon? What's that wiring, that scaffolding, that schematic that we've just assumed is going to work, that is quite literally shorting out at every junction? If you've been listening to this series, you already know that we have been talking about these big ideas, how work became identity, how value became output, how predictability got sold to us as security, and why we were told, if you pick a lane, if you keep your head down, if you do good, air quote, good work, if you play nice, if you follow the system, eventually you will be stable, respectable, worthy, valued, cute. My dad and I have been debating this for as long as I can remember because he is an immigrant. He is a refugee. He came from nothing and created everything because of the American dream. But there's a thing under the thing. There's a secret underneath that fairy tale. And it's a quieter mechanism. It's been used empire by empire, rising from the ashes, only to once again dominate and be destroyed. And it is dangerous, not because it shapes your security, your freedom, your future, but it gives structure to your imagination. This mechanism is othering. And the reason the American dream was so powerful is it was ours, not yours, not theirs. And when we differentiated ourselves, much like your marketing gurus will tell you to do, it suddenly becomes us versus them, better versus worse, right versus wrong. And that's where this gets pervasive. So what I want to talk a little bit about in this episode is how America turned us versus them into the most profitable machine and technology in history. And not just politically. In fact, this isn't a political episode at all. I don't do that. This isn't a condemnation on social organization or even economics, professionalism, most especially not spirituality. This is about division, because when it is the output of the system, it becomes the system's fastest way of replicating, because we don't create something new to be better. We create something new to be different. And that's not the same thing. Once you see that, the whole set gets shaky. The painted backdrop starts peeling, the smoke machine sputters, the wizard coughs from behind the curtain, and suddenly you realize that this whole thing is being run by a much weaker man than you were taught to fear. So let me start at the beginning. We did not invent this modern culture of business. We inherited it. The United States was born inside religious sorting, colonial hierarchy, and a deeply moralized idea of belonging, let alone genocide, but that's a different episode. In early colonial America, Puritan leaders were not exactly running a progressive diversity council. And I shouldn't laugh. That's what I'm the one that laughs at funerals, y'all. I point and laugh when somebody gets hurt. So please excuse that behavior. Again, this is not the episode where I would get into the other side of this entire conversation. The Library of Congress notes that once Puritans held power in New England, they were hostile to toleration, expelled dissenters, and enforced religious conformity as a condition of communal order. This wasn't just faith. This was survival, safety through sameness, conditional community. I've lived overseas in a variety of locations, and I've debated this with many people. Again, anecdotal, I know. But everyone kind of wants to know, what the fuck is wrong with America? Like, why do we feel you as some ominous danger threatening our security when from within the walls it feels safe and predictable and calm? And I talked about manifest destiny, our God-given right to do whatever the fuck we want. We started because we didn't like what was happening. And we positioned that as classism, racism, religion, like puritanical nobility, if you will, where, you could come over, you could leave the old world Europe and come to the new world where anything was possible. Anyone could be a landowner. Anyone could be a business owner, except for women, and not white men. But outside of that, it was entirely possible, right? And I mean, even those jokes aside, like immediately the lore does not live up to its promises. But we repeat and do over. And that's how the states started, right? Like it was a group of people being like, fuck you, we're going to do it different, which in our brains means better. And because you're different than us, that means you actually deserve to die. And then you do that for 20 generations. This matters because this country didn't start with a neutral operating system. It wasn't about freedom for all. It started with a template that said more or less, there is a right kind of person, there's a wrong kind of person, and social order depends on knowing the difference. Sure, it was wrapped up in religious dogma, but it evolved to racism, professionalism, meritocracy. And now it looks like politics and media and algorithms and personal branding. Different outfit, same skeleton. So the mechanism is simple. It's terrifyingly simple. Make people afraid of being different. Make people afraid of being associated with people who are different. Then you sell them a path to sameness. That's one hell of a business model. And this is why, like, all of the aspirational coaches out there who are like, if I can do it, you can do it too. All of the upper education. I remember when I don't know, I've told this story before, but when I was offered my MBA, it was very specifically in the arts. I did it as it was an executive program in Australia because most of their leading hierarchies and organization, be it the arts or government or corporate, didn't have anything beyond a high school education. Because guess what? The world is going to be your best education. So when I was asked to apply to this program, I wrote a very flippant letter talking about how postgraduate education in the arts is bullshit and postgraduate education in business is a money grab. And that actually the only thing that teaches you true skills is working. And I was much more interested in working in my companies than being a part of that program. So then they offered me a free seat. And I was like, well, I mean, it's not like I have anything better to do on a Friday or Saturday or Sunday. When people tell you, be like me, this is essentially what they're preaching. When you refuse to be anything but yourself, you, my friend, are the CEO in Business 3.0. Middle class is an idea. And so when everybody tells you right now the middle class is disappearing, that's not true. These structures are not true. These definitions are not true. Average work will never be able to have a toehold in industry. You succeed or you fail, but your definition of that is the only thing that matters. I'm not saying the dream of a decent life is fake. And again, whatever the fuck decent means. Millions of people were inspired, my family, my lineage included, to build more stable, accessible, secure lives in the 20th century. The middle class expansion, the American dream, was a selective fantasy, but those who could access it experienced exponential growth. Home ownership rose, wages grew for a period, unions mattered, public investment mattered. There really was this stretch where, again, for some, the deal was beneficial. You know, sell your soul to the corporate overlords for a majority of your life, but you could retire. You know, your kids could probably have a better life than you. I mean, that lasted a solid 2 generations, maybe 3. The middle class was never just about an income bracket. It was this social fantasy because it programmed people to identify as a moral code. And therefore, they were within a reward tier. The middle class said you don't have to be rich to be safe. You just have to be like us. You just have to mow your lawn at least weekly. You just have to make sure your HOA approves of your fencing. You just have to make sure the suit is part of your corporate dress code. There's a wasp. If you're watching, I just lost my train of thought. But now if you're listening, you've also gotten to experience me losing my train of thought. You're welcome. So yeah, the middle class fantasy, you don't have to own it all, just enough. You just have to obey enough. You don't have to be free, just comfortable, just a little bit better than everybody else. And the system taught you to fear being anything else. That's the spell. And it was effective as hell because it softened the brutality of old world hierarchy, but it didn't actually dismantle the hierarchy itself. Old systems were more blunt. If you were born here, you stay here. Know your place. Stay in your lane. Nobles are noble, peasants are peasants, and may God have mercy on your weird ass souls. America came in with a much better pitch deck. You can do anything, be anything, have it all, vacations, retirement, ownership. You can be something. You can have a job title with like 4 words in it. You can have a house and a lawn, save for college education. You can have a respectable amount of IKEA furniture, but you can organize it in a way that's not like their showroom. That bath mat's going on your front door, baby. This was emotional dependency on direct deposit. And all you had to do was give up your time, your wherewithal, your regulatory system, your imagination, and your willingness to play by their rules, to just not be like those other people who couldn't quite get it together, who are to blame for their own problems. And that's how the machine works, my friend, by separating, by othering. And this is where I think we're kind of missing the point right now. We think exploitation works by keeping people poor. And yes, I'm not saying that's not true. But the thing under the thing, what's really happening is we're keeping people afraid of poverty because of the shame in the struggle. And therefore, we emotionally distance ourselves from those who are vulnerable. And that's the genius of this othering. You don't need everybody to be rich. That's expensive and potentially impossible. And then everybody's the same. And how do you know that you're better than them, right? You don't want everybody happy. That's annoying. But also, like, if they're happy, then what are they working for? Like, why would they sign up for any of this? So you just need everybody to believe they're one mistake away. One promotion, one raise, one house, one right marriage, one good school district, one lucky break from being safely inside that circle. The better circle, the right circle, the rich circle. Because once they get that, they'll have everything they've ever wanted. And in exchange, you stay in a job you hate, in a relationship that exhausts you. We call burnout ambition. We call obedience responsibility. And we judge people for their bad choices without ever looking at their why. And we will shadow box anyone who feels like a threat, who feels like they might potentially take that one opportunity that is all we need to get to wherever we think we're going. And this is by design. This is what we've taken with us over the last couple centuries of being Americans. And that is why we are here right now. So how do we stop doing that? The math stopped mathing a long time ago. And the wild part is that the economic facts stopped matching the mythology decades ago. That's what the 60s were about. Pew's work on the American middle class showed that the share of adults living in middle-class households fell from 60% in the early 70s, 60s to 50% in 2021. Over time, the share of aggregate U.S. household income going to the middle class also dropped sharply, while the upper income shares rose. We all know that. But what's happening is the category that was sold as the stable backbone of American life has been shrinking almost as soon as it was defined. So when people say, why does it feel harder now than ever? I'm doing everything right, but it feels like it's all going wrong. That's not because you were lazy or broken or entitled or spiritual or faithful or failing. And it's not because you're not willing to run the adult obstacle course, but they make you feel like that. You make you feel like that. The math stopped mathing, but nobody stopped running the same numbers. That's why you feel betrayed. There's also this productivity piece where like enough is supposed to make a person feel fabulous, But Economic Policy Institute data shows that since 1979, net productivity grew dramatically faster than workers' pay. Again, we know this. In 2025, their most recent update, it says net productivity grew 90.2% from 1971 to 2025, but typical worker pay grew only 33%. So we're working 3 times harder than we did 30 years ago, but we're only making 30 cents on every dollar more. So we keep producing because we've been told that's how you do better. The economy kept extracting because that's by design. Output keeps rising, but gains don't flow proportionately. So we're fucking exhausted. That's not a motivational problem. That's not a mindset problem. And this isn't a hustle harder problem. And in fact, that's where that fucking phrase came from. We are hustling harder. It's what we fucking do. We're hustling exponentially harder. We're just getting even less than we did before we started hustling. The old security promises got thinner too. In March 2025, 70% of private industry workers had access to defined contribution plans. We used to actually get something for working for a company for most of our lives. Now, the risks get handed back to the worker. You give us your best years. We tie your identity to performance. You take on the risk yourself. And that's what we call freedom. That's why this 1099, everybody works for themselves, creative entrepreneurship, like that's the biggest blind spot is people tell themselves they're taking their freedom back, but really they're just signing up for indentured servitude for half the money and 0 benefits. And if that's what freedom looks like for you, cool. Respectfully, no. Politics didn't invent this machine, but it industrialized it. And again, this is not a political anything, but it is important to recognize that this is a partisan episode. Politics matter here because it is the current high volume expression of a much older dogma. 65% of Americans say they often or always feel exhausted when they think about politics. And 55% say angry, and only small shares say they feel hopeful or excited. That tells me something important. Politics isn't just a space where we hash out policy. It's become the most efficient emotional sorting engines in the country. We are exhausted in what would have, could have, should have been our most organizational, influential opportunity. But when we are exhausted, they are profitable. When we are outraged, they are profitable. When we are afraid, they are profitable. Again, we know this. I'm not saying anything new. But what's interesting is this like tribal certainty, this othering. If we can surround ourselves with like-minded people, both in work and in politics and in emotional expression, in spirituality, in faith, in purpose, that is also profitable. Othering keeps people busy, busy blaming, busy signaling, busy proving, busy performing, busy distancing, busy trying to make sure you're not mistaken for the other, for the people who keep fucking up. So that's how politics plays into all of this. We've been given a playbook that some of us don't even want to pay any attention to, but yet we're exhibiting those exact rules in our day-to-day. When's the last time you had a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you? When's the last time you sat next to somebody who looks differently than you, who smells differently than you, who celebrates differently than you, who gathers different places? Yeah, you have to go out of your fucking way to make that happen. What's the possibility there? We carry this straight into work. We call some people a cultural fit. We call some people professional. We call some people high potential, or we label them as not leadership material. Some people are difficult. Some people are unskilled. Neurodiversity just joined the chat. One of my people was like, hey, I'm going to start bringing you into the team, but no one really likes you and you're a little too direct. So we're going to see how this goes. That's what I'm talking about. I missed the day of performance training at school. Sorry, not sorry. I use words to communicate. I don't believe it's my job to make you feel good about that. However you feel is your experience. For a woman to show up like that, it's been really challenging. I mean, I guess for you, I just get shit done. But apparently I hurt people's feelings a lot. I just did this 10 minutes ago trying to organize a staying meeting. And it's like, hey, look, if you can't prioritize these things, that's fine. Your learning's on your own time. Peace. And they were like, am I in trouble? It's like, I'm not live your fucking life, dude. What do you even mean by that? You're asking me to make you feel good about a choice you made, which is to renege on an agreement you made. I don't give a shit. But if you just heard that whole conversation, you probably had an opinion about it. There's no context for diversity in the way that we've been working with each other for the last 300 years because it wasn't measurable. We couldn't profit off the difference. But what we do recognize now is that diversity creates more resilient, more adaptive, more intelligent, more innovative workspaces. Different learning styles, different communication styles, different cultures will inform the way we think and therefore interpret and therefore ideate and imagine and problem solve. How can we harness this rather than covertly threaten those of us who are different? Be like us or else what? That fear of the unknown is literally what keeps us obedient. The machines we've built meant only one person could succeed in them. That's what they were designed to do. They have one driver. But the rest of us are dying inside this thing that told us it would validate us, it would stabilize us, it would reward us and make us respectable. So this isn't because humans are becoming soft or we're feeling our feelings or like kids these days, right? The container is cracked. Like, the machine ain't got no fuel. No one wants to drive it anymore. So this is where this middle class myth, this American nightmare did its nastiest work. It taught people to interpret systemic exhaustion as personal failure. And you have to earn your benefits. You have to earn your salary. You have to have a title. You are a label. You are a container. And you have to separate yourself to survive. But as long as you have a yoga membership and access to artisanal, local, handmade products, you're doing great, sweetie. Your aliveness, your ability to grow and be inspired and experience everything life has to offer, that's the difference between this performative theater we've been asked to stage and actual safety. Your body knows when you're complying or when you're being. And one might be a polished cage, but it's still a cage. We've all seen the wizard behind the curtain now. I'm preaching to the choir. I get that. But what happens when everything shifts to how life works to, wait, this has all been by design? It's this Wizard of Oz moment we're all living right now. And not because the wizard was all powerful, because he's not. There is no omnipotent genius with all of the answers. There is no one right answer. The wizard is the projection, the mythology, the bureaucracy with branding, the set of incentives and a fancy coat. But once that curtain slips, the emotional tone changes immediately, and that's where we're at. And it is scary and infuriating, and there will be grief. And you may even feel stupid for a hot second because you can see exactly how you played into it all. So I was having this conversation with a new friend recently, and he was like, based on your experience, you just YOLO'd the fuck out of life. And I was like, no, I never YOLO'd. But what I learned very, very early on is that my authority figures are full of shit. My parents, my school systems, my teachers, my doctors, the rules will not keep you safe, and they are fucking wrong most of the time. The only way you know what's right is, and I'm pointing at my heart right now for those of you just watching, and you might be wrong also, but you still got to like do the thing that feels right. That's how you learn what is right for you. And what is right for you can be wrong for someone else, and you can both be right. I'm going to go back to this meeting that I was trying to organize 5 minutes ago. I can be right about it being on the schedule and that they should be there. And they can be right about missing it on the schedule because it's not on their workday and not wanting to go and not going. So how do we create space for that? That's what Business 3.0 is all about. You're not an idiot because you want to feel secure. You're not fucking basic because you want to be rewarded for your work. That's also not what I'm trying to say. It's just that we were given such a counterfeit version of success for so long. I promise you, discovering what that word means to you is going to be really different. You know, I get to spend a lot of time in this current experience after this disaster with people whose success looks like a couple of hours of work a day to have enough food to eat that day. They're not interested in what their fucking retirement plan looks like. They're not worried about if they're going to be physically able to take care of themselves if some horrible thing happens. They're just living their life in their moment. That's the beauty of that getting taken away from you for a period of time. And that might also be the ignorance. But it's not anyone's fault when something fucking crazy happens and we're not prepared for it. That's just literally the definition of being unprepared. You do not have to swing into cartoon blame every time there's a fucking problem. You don't have to flatten history into evil rich people did this. Even though, to be clear, a lot of power structures absolutely do protect those in power quite intentionally. But the bigger story here, what I am trying to get you to feel is this isn't about blame. Blame isn't useful. Blame is the game. It's othering. That's what we've inherited. We inherited an operating system where belonging was conditional, where security was moralized, where respectability was rewarded, and othering was normalized as common sense. But now we're living through the breakdown of that system. And this is why it's so disorienting. This is why you feel so unstable. And this is why you can't believe in anything right now. So what do we do? I've been drinking a lot of margaritas. I wish I were joking. This is the part where I do not, this is why I do everything I do. It's like you get to do whatever the fuck you want. And that is scary at first. And then suddenly it becomes regenerative. It becomes empowering. It increases your capacity for more. Seeing the machine only matters if it changes how you operate. Recognizing the matrix only matters if you unplug. So just notice. That's it. That's the homework assignment for the week. What happens when you see someone who's living out of their car or who's probably in one of the many unhoused encampments that are popping up around your neighborhood? They're in backyards where I am. And I'm in a bucolic, gorgeous, very progressive little small town. Notice where you distance yourself from someone who feels a little messy, a little unhinged, a little unpredictable. Notice what happens when somebody makes a mistake or fails or is choosing a course of action you believe is not going to work. Notice what happens when there's a misunderstanding. Either you feel like you're being misunderstood or someone accuses you of misunderstanding them. I had that conversation with somebody else in work yesterday morning. They suggested I was accusing them of fucking up. I was trying to figure out what had happened. I had zero suspicions of them making any mistake. I was just backtracking. But the conversation got that heated that I had to say, I feel like I'm being misunderstood right now. I'm going to suggest this isn't the best time to discuss this. Let's circle back when we have some more space because I do want to address this. This isn't a great way to communicate, but we both feel like we've been hard done by here. We're both trying to find some stable ground when we're feeling completely unstable. So let's just take a beat. Some people can't perform on command, and that's not a bad thing. Create that space. Then ask, what part of me is actually secure in this moment? Not predictable, not performative, secure. Is that what I'm getting paid for? Is that my skill set? Or have I adapted to this point? Is this relationship we're engaged in? Is this how I want to be perceived? Is this how I want to show up? What we're going to talk about next is predictability versus security, because they are not the same. But first, we just needed to figure out how being different is the most advantageous aspect to ourself. And when we can see that and love that in others, respect it at the very least, we will evolve. So, yeah, just notice where morality may have stepped in for safety. You know, a lot of us are still trying to be a good girl or a good boy, the good worker, the good citizen, the good boss, the good leader, the good whatever, neighbor, human. But somewhere deep down, do we really believe we're actually good enough? If so, why? If not, what are we afraid of? I wrote, this is a superstition, not business casual. And then audit where your income, your identity, your belonging depends on that good behavior. And whose definition was that anyway? Because from there, you can stop building security from scarcity and actually base it on capacity, not your distance from the others, but your capacity to hold both, the both and. I can be right, or let's rephrase it, you are right, I'm wrong, but we can share that together. Because once we break this us versus them paradigm, the machine literally falls apart because we're not separate anymore. There isn't a top and a bottom. And we stop asking, how do I prove that I belong? Because you're one of the parts. You're one of the many. We are the collective. And that's when we start embodying our power rather than negotiating it. So, yeah, next up, predictability versus security. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, highly recommend. A little bias, but it's all about power 3.0. And I think that these are all layering beautifully. So once again, thank you for being here. God damn, I keep trying to get these shorter, but I guess I can't stop, won't stop. Love you. Bye.